Chris, I have meat for you right here.
Second delay for plug-in.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Amen to that.
Hello, test. Hello, test. Okay, we're good. All right, now will you please help me welcome our president, formerly in Cuba under Castro.
Oh, Lord.
He has a very interesting personal story to tell if you ever corner him. Welcome, Ray Raves.
Thank you, Ron. We have some interesting speakers. First, I'm going to introduce Michael Huskinson. Now, he's been hosting the website for the anti-high density development, and he's really keeping track of this stuff for us. So I would like you to welcome Mike Huskinson.
Hi, everybody.
Okay.
Get there.
Do you need the mic over there?
We'll warm up here shortly.
I'll
Come over that way.
Hi, everybody. Hey. So I am Mike Hoskinson. I'm one of your former planning commissioners and a real estate broker, developer guy. I've got an exciting opportunity to invest in high-density housing. Who would raise your hand if you want to buy into high-density housing? I think I'm in the wrong crowd. So we're living in what I consider to be probably the most dynamic city in California as far as protecting its citizens. And I don't know if we're a conservative town. I mean, it used to be in the good old days, but we've definitely become a town that's protected its citizens very well. And I think high-density housing and the uproar from it has a lot to do with that. Not very few of us remember, I don't remember, when the Beach Edge corridor was sold as a commercial revitalization. And nobody was up to mentioning that it was going to be a high-density apartment corridor. But we got wind after we had a few of them, and people got mad. They elected new folks, but Eric Peterson on there, he put me on, a lot of other good folks, but a lot of good citizens who really drove the dynamicism of the Tea Party and whatnot, because people don't like the changes they see in their town. And one of the things we're going to talk about tonight, I want to talk to you about what the arguments pro and con are, and how they force it on towns, because there's a lot of really sneaky ways the state and the county and the local politicians kind of fib a little bit and get it built. So without further ado, identity. That's not good. One second.
So there's our favorite one on the corner of each of Ellis, the Elon.
The Elon is probably the most terrible building that's ever been built, in my opinion, in this town. Built to the edges of the sidewalk. I think 120 units per acre, something of that, and just an egregious amount of places jammed in there. It was recently the most expensive, most profitable sale per unit in Orange County history. So right there, I can tell you exactly what the scam is. It's all about, and we're going to find about using public money to get it built, and then making private profits on the way out. What is high density? Taxpayer subsidized rental apartments for which there is no local need, very few citizens want or understand, drains valuable resources, and ruins a city's quality of life forever. That's my opinion. Yours may vary. So we've been through this thing for a number of years now, and there's a lot of local and state politicians that like to throw out a lot of reasons why this is good for our town. One of the big ones that I hear from the top to the bottom is that we are in a housing crisis. How many people have heard that? Everybody. When I was on planning commission, the housing element was coming to us, and I did a little bit of research. And I was surprised to find out that in Orange County, 9 out of 10 of the cities that I looked at, the population was falling. And that was in 2015. And since I did that research, it's an open, it's not so secret anymore, that we have lost, I think, something on the level of 3 million people in the last 6 or 7 years. That's 10% roughly, 10% of the population. Now, I'm no Copernicus, but I don't understand how you can have a housing crisis if you're losing people. I don't get that. But this is the thing that they're sticking with over and over again, that we are in a housing crisis. So I say bull to that. We are not in a housing crisis. We live in one of the most beautiful towns in California. Of course people want to live here. But then the question is, do we feel we have to make room for everyone? And if we do, what about our quality of life? So politicians tell us we got to grow. I hear that over and over from some of our business-minded folks. And they say, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I say, well, I like to use logic. And I wonder, if you say you have to grow, is there a cap? It seems to me that you could use that argument forever and ever and ever. You could say, we gotta go, we gotta go. Well, I say, I've asked these guys, I said, what happened? We got 200,000 people now, less because we've lost some people. But what happens when we're 300,000? You know, traffic's pretty bad already. What about 400,000? I go, what is that magic point that we say, yeah, we can't afford to grow anymore because we don't have a quality of life? But I think we'd probably lose people before we'd probably lose them if we got that jammed up. So one of the things they use as well is, and we know this because budget's pretty upside down, is that new people will pay into the tax base. And that's only partly true. But one of the things you never hear from them is how much each citizen costs. For every citizen that moves into our town, they cost in police, fire, infrastructure, utility. Every person has a dollar value attached to them. Nobody is free, as is no money is free that we get from the state. So everyone has a dollar value attached to them. So if we're not bringing for sure new money in, that those folks will end up in the long term costing us more money, because I think there's a point of diminishing returns. And one of the ones I found that was interesting on planning was we heard over and over from builders and developers and bankers and those kind of folks that this is a property rights issue, that people should be to do with their property as they will. And I was in, again, one of our planning meetings, and I had read through the entire Beach Edinger corridor document, which was 150 pages. And I looked at one of the folks in planning in an open session, and I asked her, I said, I read through the whole document last night, and the one thing I just haven't been able to find is the density limit. And I said, could you point that out? Because I had the whole document sitting on the dais in front of me. I said, point it out, what page is it on? And she said, I think she kind of made a mistake when she blurted it out. She goes, oh, that's because there isn't one. And I looked at her, I said, you mean I can have 1,000 units an acre? And then she went silent after that. But my point would be, your property rights coexist with your neighbor's property rights as well. So if I have a big plot of land on Beach Boulevard and they let me build 500 units an acre, I diminish the property rights of my neighbors and of people in town as well. That's right. So that argument to me is another false one. So these are the major ones that I hear from politicians and developers and folks that this is the reason why you need that in your town. But I think if you go down that road, it's really hard to stop once it's gone down that path. Luckily we have, I think, at the right time. Anybody know who Lucy Dunn is? Heard of Lucy Dunn? I call her Darth Vader. Yeah. She looks like a nice lady. She looks like the nicest grandma. She's an opera singer, she's a grandma, She is, without a doubt, the biggest cancer on this, maybe with the exception of Jerry Brown. This woman, who came, I believe, Carrie, tell me, came out of our Chamber of Commerce, did she not? Was she part of our?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay,
Oh,
That
boy.
would've been before my time.
but she was the Bolsa Chica gal. She was trying to force all the homes on Bolsa Chica. That she unsuccessfully, never happened. She is the one out in the Inland Empire trying to force toll lanes on them at the moment. She lives in Coto de Casa, in a gated community.
Oh, she has a nice estate, doesn't she?
Schwarzenegger employed her to write AB 35 and SB 375. These are the Global Warming Solutions Act, and then its housing companion that forces high-density housing. So this woman has, maybe more than anybody, has had a hand in all that garbage we see on Beach Boulevard and at Ettinger. And she continues to do it. I watch her in open, I've looked at a bunch of videos in prep for this. It's indefatigable, saying this is, using all these arguments, that this is good for your town and you need to put more of it in there. And so, and she said in one of her quotes, Dunn is committed to implementation of the state's recent planning law, SB 375, requiring thoughtful planning of housing and transportation at the local level. Sounds so good when they say it that way. So there's a lot of, very few people are fascinated by this, and I am fascinated by it. How many ways the state employs trickery to get us, the things they try to sell us in public, but very few people see the back end of it. And this is an interesting little thing I found. It's called the Cal Enviro Screen. This is a map that you can go to. You can go look that name up right now, and it's a dynamic map. You can zoom in or zoom out to the whole state of California, and the whole state is kind of all in these different shades of blocks, from light green to dark red. And we all know the state's kind of obsessed with a thing called global warming. And this map purports to say these particular neighborhoods in red are more polluted than other neighborhoods, and therefore they need more help. Well, what this thing is really is a redistribution of wealth map. And I'll show you the next page. This is Long Beach Airport in the center. So it's not exactly huge. I mean, this area, a couple miles right here. Now, to the left and bottom, the state will have you believe that there is more pollution right there. And up on the top, there's very, very little or to none in that space. But what this really is this is middle to high income housing, and there's lower income housing over here. Where you see the red and the brown, or the orange, this is where they direct cap and trade funds to use to build housing. So this is how they force this, and this is a redistribution of wealth map, because our state tends to lean a little left. So just a touch, just a touch. But I found this kind of fascinating because could you imagine with all the air traffic that goes in and out of there, logic would dictate to you that this entire area would be bright red if the pollution were true, right? And it's even worse because the prevailing winds go the other way. So the red should be right here if you thought logically, which is in short supply in Sacramento. But I love that map because that shows the crookery of these guys. Just found this, a friend of mine in Long Beach sent this to me. So we've got a couple new laws that a senator named Scott Wiener, who I know this guy is coming out of Sacramento.
Yes.
He's put together a couple laws, SB 827 and SB 828. I believe they are in direct result of how hard we fought in Huntington Beach. These laws attempt to take away our local control. This map is interesting. They call it upzoning. Well, what this means, this is Huntington Beach, this is Beach Boulevard, and these are the major streets here. This is where, now they're telling us, if you build here, you will get money, because it's what they call a transit corridor. Because the state believes they're going to build high-density housing that's going to be near a bus stop. You're going to go live in a tiny Cracker Jack apartment. You're going to give your car up because your car is killing the planet. They think you're going to, they really believe this. Well, some of them do, some of them I don't think care about it. But so this is where they've basically said in red, when they say upzoning, this is where the money is, kids. So come and build something here. So it's no big shocker that there are developers that look at that and go, red is green to us. That's where the bucks are. And we want to be there. And so if they're knocking downtown on a few of our politicians, you'll understand why. Because there's a cash register that needs to be rung here.
Michael, can I have?
Yes, sir.
Use the term upzoning.
Yes, that's their term.
Their term, right, yes. Nothing.
Do you want your speech on video or would you?
Sure,
like it
please do. I'll be recording it.
Oh, okay.
Do it both.
No, it is completely independent of that because it is based on the laws, the 827 and 828. So I'm sure nobody is shocked here. Yes, ma'am.
Would you repeat the question, because we couldn't
Oh,
hear
okay.
that.
Sure. Go ahead and ask.
Michael used the term upzoning, which is a term that the state has concocted. It has nothing to do with the zoning control that's legally authorized for our city council and our city planning commission. So I asked, does this have anything to do with our city council or city planning commission? No.
And again, I think this law exists because of Huntington Beach. I may be a little, I don't know if I'm getting too prideful in what we've done here, but I really think it has a lot to do. Because if they can successfully take away local control, nobody here will be able to say anything. And here's the next slide will show you something interesting. So they had a thing that clicked, I said map details, and I clicked on it. So SCAG, how many people know what SCAG is? Anybody? It's another stealthy thing. Southern California Association of Governments is the largest regional government, or they call it a metropolitan planning organization in the country. We're surrounded by it. 161 cities. It has a $500 billion plan to remake Southern California right now. These are the people that the state is trying to give the power to put a black box in every one of our cars to tax us by the mile. These are very dangerous people. SCAG says, this is SCAG's approved plan for metro bus rails by 2040. Senate Bill 827 would allow massive upzoning in the marked territory by right and without the usual public hearings. So they want to take this and they want to completely do this in the dark where none of us have a vote on this. So how does it get built? Politicians and interest groups like the Builders Industry Association, or the BIA that we call it, or developers, or what they call stakeholders. And whenever you hear the word stakeholder, you got to put your hand on your wallet real quick because they're coming for it. Stakeholders means everybody but you. So it's politicians, developers, landowners, government people, but it's everybody who's got a dollar value stake, except the citizens who are going to have to live with the problems. Politicians and interest groups decide to force high-density housing in backroom deals. Politicians and interest groups create legislation like 827 and 828, forcing development. Low-income housing tax credits and bond financing are created to give developers taxpayer subsidies. So let's say I'm a developer and I got the right to build a lawn or something like that. I would go secure low-income housing tax credits from the state or from whatever entities grant them. I could take that to a bank. I could walk in the door and be given a huge loan for that. It's money in the bank for these guys. So they take a piece of paper, they walk into a bank, a couple $100 million, and you're off to the races. And it's on our backs. And then at the end of it, the housing credits allow them to deduct that amount from their end all be all on their balance sheet. And we just helped finance high-density housing in our own town. It's like Stalin said, we will sell them the rope that they will hang themselves with. Then the one that was interesting, which I caught to a little bit late, about the propaganda campaign. So this was the Beach Edger corridor. So we heard a lot of politicians selling this. It's going to be a commercial revitalization, and they repeat it over and over and over again. Nobody ever mentioned big apartment buildings. So there was a kind of a brainwashing thing that went on for the public. And then local politicians parrot the Sacramento line, And then HDD is built before the public has enough awareness to mount a defense. And I've seen this with a lot of other cities I've worked with, and Arthur has worked with, and we've all been around to these other cities. And a lot of them they just didn't know in time, and the politicians were so good at sneaking it through that it got built, and the South Bay is really bad right now. Arthur, what's the worst city? Like Hannah, how many where they built so much of this?
Like that is neck deep in Agenda 21 and all this other garbage.
Yeah.
Hermosa Beach.
Hermosa Beach, yeah. It didn't have room anyways. So just when I got put on planning commission, we started working on the beach edge corridor. And the builders got a little nervous about it.
Wow.
And they had an emergency meeting at Old World. And I snuck into it, sat in the back, full of developers and politicians and all over the place. And they were really worried about what Huntington Beach was doing. This guy was the head of the BIA at the time. I heard him say this in reference to us, to all of us. Huntington Beach is, citizens are economically illiterate because we don't like high-density housing. And that's the kind of the bully and the threats they use to get these things built. So a lot of us have wondered, because there's a lot of us kind of look at this stuff and say, it doesn't look like it's full. Like, we know people that live in the neighborhood adjacent to Elon. They are convinced that it's not even half full, and that the people kind of randomly turn lights on and off to make it look like it's full. They don't see people moving there. And we've been wondering, some folks say, oh, it's going to be housing for illegal immigrants. No, I don't know. That sounds a little specious to me, but I think we might have hit on something with Denver. This is in January in Denver. They went crazy for high-density housing in downtown Denver, big skyscrapers full of stuff, and it sat vacant. They're having a huge vacancy problem. So a developer, a low-income developer, came to the city council and said, hey, city council, why don't you subsidize these for low-income people? And they've got a program they just passed a month ago that these now low-income people get huge subsidies, so the landlords are getting their full value, and we are paying the tab for these folks to subsidize these empty apartments that nobody needed. And because they don't do their homework, because it's not really the reason they're there. They don't care if nobody needs it, because they're gonna make so much money off it. If they force it, they'll leave us with the tab for it later. They don't care. So, and I think that's kind of the direction some of this stuff's gonna go, because right now, like if you look at some of these, and we call occasionally and we'll ask for prices, a 600 square foot studio is about $1,800 to $2,200. That's a shoebox. That's a pretty scary little small place. So, I don't know how many people are jumping at the chance to pay that much money for a little tiny apartment. I think that's the end of it. Hopefully it's not the end. But anyways, questions? Anybody have questions?
Microphone.
Hi. They are the Building Industry Association. They are the building industry trade group. So they are the people that their job is to promote building and everything developer, everything. So they're the cheerleaders for the builders. Yeah.
It's our only recourse once the state passes one of these laws to do an initiative and get it on the ballot.
No, we've got a great advantage right now. We have Michael Gates, who couldn't be here tonight, sadly, but Michael Gates has been phenomenal at fighting this. Michael Gates really is a guy that is there for the folks and cares, and has found really innovative ways to fight this off. So I think the first thing is to have an elected city attorney, which apparently very few cities have. They have hired city attorneys that seem to be a lot quieter than elected ones. So you have Michael Gates, you got to get good people on city council. I'm certainly an advocate for Eric Peterson and Ron Sterud in the upcoming election. But I think that's the biggest thing. But if you don't have that, those kind of things are direct lawsuits. Like we've had people, there was a situation downtown that one citizen was trying to push, basically turning all of downtown into a gated community where everything was going to be permit parking. And a couple folks didn't like it. I was one of them because I lived on 11th Street at the time. We got together and funded a lawsuit and we beat him and sent him packing. So, yes, sir, in the corner.
Michael, you are amazing for a young fellow.
The stamina, huh?
I'm 81, and I want to make a couple comments about what you said.
Okay.
And
I didn't blame you for this, Dave. I mean, no, I'm not blaming you.
Right. Despite my Boston accent, I've been here for 51 years. Now, one thing, in the beginning, when all homes were being built, the different tracts, there was a homeowners group, and they did a heck of a lot of good, and I was, as a citizen, part of that. And one of the things, because there was a time before that, before I came here, that it wasn't as bad as it is now, but let's just say people kind of did what they want. They, city council meetings were rehearsed ahead of time in the afternoon, and you know, kind of a lot of Brown Act violations. But they worked overtime, and for apartments, they had a relationship between the number of beds, or bedrooms, I should say, because everybody in California, you know, essentially has a car. So that determined the number of parking spaces. Now, of course, when the Beach Edinger revised plan came in, they threw all that out. So that's why you have these places with no parking, and they're, you know, for the residents of these places, and they're going into the neighborhoods and all that sort of thing. You're absolutely right about the original Beach Edinger plan. Was mainly Beach Boulevard, and we'd meet, I first got on the council in 92. We'd meet in a tall building there at Beach and Warner, and the discussion was the economic development of Beach Boulevard, the fact that there were a lot of small lots, individual lots, and that sort of thing, and nothing, believe me, nothing about apartments. And I've done a lot of driving around this city you know, I was a total of 16 years on the council. We have apartments all over the place. You know, I would like to, probably I can convince a couple of my friends in the council to actually do that count, because apartments far outnumber. Just drive along any street, you know, all the duplexes and fourplexes and all that.
You're talking about apartments in the aggregate across the whole city.
Exactly.
Right.
They much outnumber, you know, individual homes. So we have plenty of that. But as I say, that was all thrown out, and I was off the council during that time and unaware of what was going on. I kind of saw the beginning of it because there was some discussion, not on that level, but, and it was funny because they brought in the liberals too, because they were all concerned about everybody on their bike, you know, and matter of fact.
You told me a story that Debbie Cook took you on a ride, and there was a guy that came here talking about bicycle lanes and getting people out of their cars and that whole bit, and that would have been 15 years ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago.
At least, right.
Yeah, so this is a plan that these folks had, because all this stuff talking about getting people out of their cars and transit and bike lanes, it's all tied together. Everybody, I'm not talking Agenda 21 here, am I? Conspiracy theory stuff.
Well, that's how they.
Exactly what it is. They call it, it's called, who's heard the term sustainable development? Sustainable development is Agenda 21. They are synonymous. And if you go to the UN Agenda 21 site, it calls it sustainable development. So it is what it is. So I'm sorry I cut you off.
Yeah, well, it's just that, so that turned, and actually liberals were involved too, and on those, you go back in the votes that put it into place, because they were, and there's someone who I won't mention now, unless you want to mention, that's running for council, that's got that.
See no evil, hear no evil.
Yes, and you know, recently I had to go to a place that I was unaware of its exact location on Beach Boulevard. Problem with Beach Boulevard is that there's no turnout places for the buses to stop. So what should have taken me 15 minutes, honest to God, took almost 45 minutes because it was rush hour. It took me 3 lights to get through past the Bolsa Chica intersection because the bus stopped and there was some disabled person and then taking the bikes off the back and all that stuff. And honest to God, it was 3 lights.
We'll keep
So-
our cars, right? We're gonna keep our cars.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. So you're absolutely spot on how this happened, and the fantastic thing that happened, something that I'm, as an old guy, not that conversant with. I depend on my family who are involved in IT. But the website is the way you beat all these pieces of literature that come out. You know, it used to piss me off so much because I didn't accept money from those people. And there'd be every day, you know, the things coming and the things, and I knew the cost of them, saying that they did what I did, and they did just the opposite, the lying SOBs.
Kind of shameless, huh?
Yeah.
How many people did you get the flyer from Dana Rohrabacher, the letter, that was Eric Peterson's statement? Did everybody see that?
That was great.
You see that? Eric Peterson, before he got elected, was called into a meeting at the Lincoln Club, or Pacific Club, big Newport Beachy kind of thing, where Scott Baugh and a host of developers tried to buy him off in his campaign. They said, we'll fund your campaign if you stop talking about high-density housing. That's how much these guys are serious about this. Yeah.
I had a question, almost 2 questions. Do the builders that build the apartments get to be the landlord and keep all the rent?
That's a good question. I don't know that. I mean, the traditional thing for developers, and Carrie can fill this in too because she deals with that, but that somebody will get an entitlement. A lot of times a developer will get an entitlement which means going through the city process and getting the approvals for a development. And then they'll pass it off to somebody else who'll take the building part of it, and then they'll sell it, like they sold the Elan recently. So I think it just depends, but I'm not aware that they usually,
Usually not. Usually there's a developer and then there's the developers in partnership with an owner, like UDR. UDR
So
owns.
the developer pays his part.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they're an equity, what's called an equity investor. Like UDR that owns Bellaterra and Pacific City. UDR is the part of the equity investment. And they'll keep the rents. And then, but in the case of the Elon, like Mike said, that was purely built for development and sale. And the developer got all the tax credits, all the tax subsidies, and then boom, they're gone.
And the other part of my question was, I thought that Gates and the current city council had stopped all future building of high density stuff, except for what's been already been contracted. Is that still true?
mostly. So what we did when it came to planning, and then it went to city council, was we said there was a thing called the MAND, M-A-N-D, the maximum allowable net development, I think it was. Net density. So it dealt with, they wanted to have 4,200 units, and we brought it down successfully down to 2,100 units, which gave us credit for everything that had been built. So it basically said there's nothing left to build.
And what are the agreements that go with it? They have kind of high
So they're, yeah.
So you have, the city of Huntington Beach is broken down by map into several different, what they call zoning overlays. So the beach Edinger is one zoning overlay, and then the downtown specific plan is another zoning overlay. And so it has caps on density, it has required parking, but there's nothing to stop a developer from coming in and wanting more, asking for a variance.
We can't be cities, you know.
Yes, they can, but here's, and this is what I love to remind people, it all comes down to 4 votes. Okay, so you have 4 votes on the city council, and by the way, those city council people appoint planning commissioners. And if those planning commissioners agree with the variances, the only thing you can do next is appeal. For example, Eric Peterson appealed the Manic Motors project, which is a monstrosity of a development down there. Because it's not adequately parked and it's not safe. You ridden on city council because there are he doesn't have enough votes on city council right now to stop other areas like that. That's why your city council vote is the most important vote you can make for your quality of life. And, unfortunately, we have too many people on council right now that support high density.
Sir?
And will you make your presentation material available to us?
I will. I think what I'm going to do, I have to apologize. I didn't have a lot of time to prep for this. This is reasonably incomplete. There's a lot more information I want to put out. And I think what I'll probably do is put it either in the form of a website or maybe a video, and I'll get it to Ron and everybody and Ray, and maybe they'll send it out in an email or something where it'll be a little more easier to digest than this, and you can kind of put links and things.
Okay, the second question I have is regarding Michael Gates and the effort to heal anything condition hearing. I guess we won the initial, but it's back in the field. What is the status?
I wish he had been here for that. I'm not exactly sure what the full update on that is because he hasn't told me. I'm not sure what the grounds are for them. I thought if you went to state Supreme Court and lost that there was no appeal, other than going to Supreme Court. But they have managed to bring it back on some level, maybe just a part of it or something. Just so for everybody to know, the Kennedy Commission is what I like to call a low income. They popped up out of nowhere when we made changes to the Beach Edinger plan to sue the city, and they said we denied 2 homeless veterans the access to low-income housing. They found 2 homeless veterans and they made them the plaintiff. But when you went, I don't know if this is still the case, but you went to the Kennedy Commission website, there was in their we'd like to thank section, there was the Building Industry Association and all these Jamboree Housing, which is a huge low-income developer. All these developers, you think, wait a minute, I thought you're, like a low-income goody two-shoes group, but they're shills for the developer with the sheen of we're good people. They're a bad group, but they're fairly relentless. I'll give them that. Yeah.
That would be my other question. If we build, because I understood that some of these percentage is low income. If the builder builds a low income property or project, does that all disappear the first time the first tenant moves out, or is that a permanent thing that goes on in perpetuity that has to do with low income?
So the way it works in an entitlement situation, and we had a lot of this come when I was on Planning Commission, there is covenants that are attached to, a developer will say, okay, I'm going to dedicate 10%, because the city makes them do 10% as affordable housing.
Or pay in lieu of.
Or they'll pay to get out of it, exactly, they'll just buy them out of it. But they will, I've lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. Tell me your question one more time, I got on a tangent.
Can the low income
Oh, right.
buildings be
Yeah.
maintained as low income?
Right, so yes, no, they're, once something gets agreed to and it gets entitled, it's supposed to be good there for the perpetuity. Couple ways I've heard that they get around it is they go bankrupt, and whatever that entity was, sometimes if it wasn't written correctly, they can whitewash or wipe out the requirements and go back and resell it. So there are ways that they do get away from that. But the majority of them have just a small amount of 10% that is what is called low income. It's not really, we have, I think our income here, our median income is about $85,000 a year. And we have 4 tiers of low income, and it's just a percentage off what the median is, and it goes down 4 levels. So it's not cheap to live here, as we well know. But I mean, if somebody was making $66,000 a year, you probably wouldn't think of them as a low income recipient. Sir, I think I feel the hook is coming.
I just want to take advantage of following up on Carrie's point about 4 votes on the city council. First of all, my education and work experience, my whole life has been involved with politics. So I want to remind everybody, here in California, we have 2 kinds of cities: charter cities and general law cities. If you live in a general law city like Costa Mesa, if something gets passed in Sacramento, the city has to follow it. Fortunately, historically, I don't know how this happened, those of us who live in charter cities have an additional layer of protection that the laws passed by the legislature don't automatically apply on certain conditions. So we still have that as a benefit, and our city attorney, Michael Gates, took advantage of that in one of these recent lawsuit controversies. But I really, really want to follow up on Carrie's point. 4 votes on the city council. You're all aware of the signs that go out when people are running for an election. They cost money. If you don't have money, you can't get the signs out. If you don't get the signs out, you don't get elected. So the people with the money, and here in Huntington Beach, the developers and the employee unions, really control the outcome of the election because they put money into the candidates that they see is going to support their position. This year, we have Eric Peterson running for re-election. There are 4 others running who are vulnerable to this kind of union builder development. We have Ron Sterrett running. He's not beholden to anybody. But if we get him on the council with Eric Peterson and Lynn Sametta, then we have a chance of influencing the outcome because, what's her first name, Hardy? Jill Hardy can be influenced. She's not an automatic union deliver vote. But it's absolutely imperative this year that we get Ron Sterrett and Eric Peterson elected. So all of you who chose to come here Wednesday night, you had the privilege of hearing a real treasure, Mike Hoskinson, providing you with information that he generates and he puts out, and it's just wonderful hearing it. But each of you have to know at least 10 or 20 or 30 neighbors that you can talk to between now and November and get them to vote for Eric Peterson and Ron Sterrett. With that, you have a chance of making some of the changes that Mike has been alluding to. Housekeeping. Several of you just came and sat down, and I don't think you signed in on the register, so please be sure to do that before you leave. Yes, ma'am.
That if anybody has the 8440, going to come in.
Refresh my memory on that one.
That's fine for us on the 34 cities with chronic illness.
Okay.
Existing and future homelessness fund. And John Marlock, Senator John Marlock, Senator Park Days, Senator Janet Lee, or the Republicans of course, they are 40. Tom Davey and Sharon Kirk Silva, Assembly, they are against. I mean, they are for,
yeah.
so they are for.
Yeah.
I don't think it was voted yet, but it's coming.
Yeah.
Misha Steele, I talked to the representative, Misha Steele is against, because she thinks so, we can just go on how much all we can get our tax can, and we don't need funds for the I would like to know that.
Well, I'm a pretty harsh critic on the homeless thing. I think we create that, you know. Again, I'm kind of blunt with people. I tell them, don't feed the bears. You know, we learn that is brutal, but it is what it is. We're having something that is making our homeless population grow quite larger. It's sober living homes that we all know what they are. Sober living homes at the moment practice an interesting thing called curbing. And they literally, the companies will find who have alcohol and drug addiction problems in the Midwest and places back east. They will bring them here because wouldn't you rather rehab on the sunny shores of California? And they drain them of their insurance and they kick them to the curb, thus the curbing, you know, my favorite verb. But they become our instant homeless population because they don't want to go home. You know, no big shocker. So we're having, just in the police, did a police academy, no jokes. And we were there for 10 weeks. And one of the first meeting was with the homeless task force. We had 2